So I grew up in the East Highlands, so kind of between Aberdeen and Inverness, if people know that part of Scotland. What is actually now the Cairngorm National Park. So it's often I'm asked about, how I get into the outdoors, but I didn't really get into the outdoors. I was just, surrounded by lochs and forests and rivers and, wildlife my entire sort of youth. And although no one intentionally sort of taught me how to deal with risk when I was a kid, but you do it automatically. That's how you do it. You go out and you climb trees, and sometimes you fall out. You fall in rivers, and you start to get swept away, and you just get back to shore, hopefully. But you do these sort of things on your own, or with your mates, or with my kids, my brother. Some people attempt to overly protect their kids, which I get. I get the instinct, right? You want to keep them safe, but if you surround them by cotton wool, you're only keeping them safe for a very short period. Longer term, one day they're going to leave home. They're going to be out in the world on their own. The world has risks. It has dangers and it has threats, whether you like it or not. And if you haven't got the tools to deal with those, then it's going to go very badly for you. So I think it happened naturally to me anyway, just because of the environment I grew up in. But with my kids, I'm more actively trying to sort of arm them with those things so that they can go out and they do potentially dangerous things, but do them safely. Grew up as a kid in the 80s. Every boy had an action man, and the sort of films that were on TV, there was no sort of films really for kids like there are today, like with Netflix and Amazon and Disney channels. So you watch the old, World War II and the old westerns on BBC Two at 6 o'clock on a whatever it was, on a Friday night. And I can still remember, I was really young, but I can remember the Falklands War happening. And my father's side of the family were all coal miners, and my mum's side of the family were like farm workers. And the forces seemed a way of kind of seeing the world, of having adventures. And my brother was a few years older than me, and he joined the army at 16, and he came back, and he'd been to Cyprus, and he'd been to South Georgia and the Falklands, and, he was getting what we thought was like, he owned a car, which I was like, oh my God, he's got a car, he's flash, you know what I mean? So he had a CD player, God almighty. So I was like, this is awesome. He's out there, he's doing all this cool stuff, he's running around, shooting things, blowing things up, dressed in army kit, looks all really cool. He's seeing the world, getting paid money. And I think that was why we ended up going down that route. And I spent the vast majority of my time in 4-9 Squadron, which was the para-commando EOD squadron. So EOD is explosive ordnance disposal, basically bomb disposal. So everyone in that squadron, well, it's split, but everyone's obviously bomb disposal trained, and then you've got different troops. One supports the commandos, one supports the paras, and one supports the special forces. That's the kind of the areas that we operate in. Most of the time you're going in and you're carrying out search by feel, because often lakes, rivers, sewers in the UK, it's nil visibility. And then you'd diffuse it or you'd make it safe, and there's a number of ways to do that, and then you'd remove it. But it was all fairly low tech.
I think the average person imagines that if you touch a bomb, then it's going to explode. So when you say that you're searching for them by hand, that sounds quite terrifying. But is that not the case, really?
No, I mean, like, depends on the sort of the system. Some munitions are designed to go off at a very light touch, like anti-personnel mines, whereas an anti-tank mine isn't. An anti-tank mine is designed to go off when a tank or a vehicle drives over it, so the pressure pad's much. So you could probably jump up and down an anti-tank mine and it won't go off. Unless it's older and then things start to rust, in which case that's why, somebody walking across a very old anti-tank mine. Remember World War II, went out in the desert, IEDs, so I think what most people are more used to hearing about IEDs, these improvised explosive devices like booby traps, basically. They're obviously handmade DIY stuff, and they're designed to go off more often than not when someone comes closer, a vehicle drives past. They're a different kettle of fish. But then you've got the big things, like a big World War II German drop bomb. If it hasn't gone off, the chances are you can hit it with a hammer and it's not going to go off. You could normally go and sit on the bomb and just unscrew the fuse. But again, even our methods of dealing with World War II bombs in the 2000s, we were using 1940s methods. It was the right method for the right bomb. So how the guys did it back in the 40s, and how we still do it, they also did it when I was in, was that you drill a little you use a hand drill to drill a little hole in the fuse, and then you flood it with super saturated salt water, and you keep doing that, you let it dry, and then the salt crystals basically clog up the fuse, so the fuse can't move, and then you unscrew it and you take it away. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, we had instances where we had these things in London, And I think the police who were putting the cordon up and that sort of stuff, and anybody looking on, expected us to come out in the old bomb suits that you see. But we'd go down there in like, shirt sleeve order, and and just boots and trousers, and then you'd sort of sit cowboy style on the bomb to deal with the fuse. And they're like, "Well, where's all your protective gear?" Like, man, that's a 1,000-pound German drop bomb, right? It's 500 kilograms of explosive, and if that goes off, which it won't, but if it went off, a bomb suit's not. If we sat in a tank, it's not going to make any difference. It might as well be comfortable. So I will say I'm not an adrenaline junkie. And I could be wrong. Maybe I am. I just don't realise it. We make decisions subconsciously that we're not aware of. But what I am is a control freak. And I sort of almost love the challenge of being able to do these activities that other people choose not to do, because I think they misunderstand it. They misunderstand the risks, and they misunderstand your capability to manage those risks, to make something that seems very, very dangerous safe. And so that was formalised in the forces, because that's one of the things on both in the bomb disposal course and the high risk search course. They are taught about how to do an accurate threat assessment or risk assessment in more civilian terms, how to do an accurate risk assessment. And once you can identify the actual risks, cerebrally, not emotionally, you can then do something about them. Complacency will kill you. You have to turn up on the day ready to go. But on the forces, on these exploration stuff or on stunts, the requirement to not just phone it in, I quite like. So you get to a point, no matter how you join the forces or in which sort of avenue you take, you get to a point where you will start getting more and more in command, and which means further and further from the coalface. You start sort of commanding from behind the desk. And we do tend to hemorrhage people in the forces at around that 30, 32 year old, because again, regardless of how you've joined, which stream you've taken, that tends to be the time you start moving back to there. And it's fine, it's great. I've got my best friends in the forces stayed in. One's a brigadier now, for God's sake. But I joined to be a soldier. I joined to kind of jump out of absolute helicopters and jump out of planes and shoot guns and blow things up, and I had a great time, and I did it for much longer than most people would get the chance to, because of the units I was in and the skill sets I have. I'm actually kind of like keep stepping sideways, not up. Do I miss it? I miss what I was doing, but I don't miss what I would have been doing had I stayed in, because I would get further and further from that sort of practical soldiering, more and more into the kind of strategic, dare I say it, desk work, which is super important, but just not for me. So I had a little outdoor company with a friend of mine in Hereford, just taking mostly stag and hen groups, like climbing, gorge climbing, coast steering, canoeing on the Wye, that sort of stuff. And that kind of kept the wolf from the door whilst I was starting in telly. And what I was doing in TV and mostly was sort of support work to the kind of adventure documentary making. So I was based in Bristol at the time, and Bristol at that point was the big centre for that kind of adventure media filmmaking, because you had the BBC Natural History Unit there. So all your big wildlife films, a lot of your kind of expeditionary science and history films were being made out of Bristol. So I started doing things like working as a safety diver or dive supervisor on these sort of things, as a rope safety guy, climbing, mountaineering supervisor, those sort of things. And then I'd made friends with quite a few directors and like outdoor wildlife cameramen, and they had said, they're looking for ideas for Series 7 of Coast. I imagine no one watching this will remember Coast, but Coast is a big thing for like 10, 15 years on the BBC. And basically the premise was they went round the coast of the UK looking at all different things. And after six laps of the UK, they might be a bit shy of ideas. So I was like, okay, cool, I'll come up with some ideas, I'll pitch it to them, and then I can generate some work for myself. The idea being is like, there's these amazing cliffs, right? I can take your presenter on these cliffs. Or there's this real cool sort of sea caves, so I might not be able to take them. I can go in there, get the footage, and bring it out. All these really deep wrecks that have never been dived, like 120 metre deep wrecks in the Irish Sea. I can go and dive them and then film it, and then your presenter can unpack that. So I sent these ideas off. Concurrent to that, I'd been making my own little films, mostly because I'd been doing a lot more like public speaking, like talks usually at like adventure shows and festivals and diving festivals and that sort of stuff. And I'd start to film things only because sometimes when I was doing the talks, a photo didn't explain things as well as a little video clip. Now, bear in mind that I was using a GoPro 1 at the time. And it wasn't even called a GoPro 1 because why would you call the GoPro 1 if you didn't know there was going to be a 2? So that was the kind of level of technology. And I'd made a little film on a thing called the Cave of Skulls up in Scotland, solo cave diving this thing, which I'd actually sold the footage to the BBC, well, BBC Scotland. So 6 or 7 people would have probably watched it, one being my mum, that being it. But the Coast had seen this. And when you're down in a cave or whatever it was I was doing on your own, because most things were, I was talking to camera. So before even selfies were a thing, before phones had cameras, I was talking to a GoPro on my own because there's no one else to talk to. It kind of keeps you sane in the dark. They'd seen this, and I think they'd made the assumption that I was pitching myself to be on screen. And genuinely I wasn't. And they said, we love your ideas, it's great. I was like, thanks so much. And they said, but would you consider presenting something that wasn't extreme? I was like, yes, poker face on, like, yes. I said, well, what have you got for me? Thinking, right, your brain's working on like 100 miles an hour, trying to keep up. And still, we've got this story. It's about shepherding on the Isle of Lewis, and because you're Scottish, we'd like you to go and cover it. I was like, yeah, sure. Thinking, what in the is going on here? Like, yeah, absolutely. Thinking, okay, this is. So that was that. They sent me up to Lewis to do this thing on the shepherds. It was in this big, like, quite hilly area. So the camera was a huge big camera. The researchers, the last had a sort of medium, and I had a tiny little camera to try and do sort of selfies as we were going. Long story short, I ended up carrying all 3 of the cameras because, I was still kind of reasonably fit. But as well as that, because I was a mountain guide, I'd never go, and it wouldn't occur to me to go in the hills. And this wasn't just from the mountain guide, but same in the forces, without a map and compass in my pocket. Like, why would you wouldn't do that? And the cloud came down, so the mist came down, and the shepherds, who weren't the most friendly people in the world to the rest of the crew, they're fine with me, but they just buggered off up the hill. So we lost them. And they were like, I was like, it's fine, I know where they're going. They're going to go up the top, and the big pen we're aiming for is the other side. So I got my map out, and I was all right, just follow me, cool. Off we went. We caught up with them, stopped, got the cameras out, kind of. And again, I had no point of reference. So this was all normal stuff. And obviously, when I was supporting these sort of films, as the mountain guide, I'd be carrying a lot of kit, and this was nothing new for me, and I just thought this is standard practice. So we got back, and a few days later, I went up to do the voiceover bits for it. And the exec producer for Coast, like the head man, came and said, Andy, we're really grateful about, what you did up there. It was, you went above and beyond. We would never normally expect you to do that. And again, it was one of those moments where I was going, yes. And my head's going, what? I don't know what you're talking about, mate. So he says, and I think we were so impressed that we'd like to offer you, like, I think another 5 episodes in the series. And that was the start of my sort of TV presenting career. So I still maintain the only reason that I ever had any sort of career in telly was because I can carry heavy things up a hill and read a map. That's it. There's things that are great to have done. They're not good to do. They're great to have done. P Company, for example. So P Company is the parachute selection course, right? It's horrendous. It's absolute torture for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. It's not good to do. That's kind of the point, actually. But it's great to have done. You challenge yourself to do something, you do it. And it helps a lot of things. I spoke recently to, I was at the Duke of Edinburgh Award Gold celebrations at Buckingham Palace. One does one's best. And I was talking to the kids, and one of the questions that came up was about building resilience, like mental resilience. It's like, well, the best way to be able to deal with difficult things is to do difficult things.
Do you think that you feel fear in the same way as other people?
So for a long time, the answer would have been yes. And I still think broadly yes, I do. What I've learned in the last year or so is that, we are all, this idea about neurodivergence, there's neurotypical neurodivergence, okay, partly. But I think we're all different. Like, we're all, if there's 50 things in the spectrum, everyone's got at least 1 or 2 of those things, to a greater or lesser extent. So we're all our brains all work slightly differently. For a long time, I just thought people were stupid. It turns out maybe they're not. We just think differently. But so I definitely feel fear in the same way. If I don't understand something, the fear of the unknown, you know, when I first started learning to skydive, I was just as terrified as everyone else, which is good because it makes me a good instructor. I don't teach diving because I learned to dive when I was a kid and I never really went through that sort of fear stage, but I learned to skydive in my 30s and I can still acutely remember what it's like to jump out of a plane for the first time. So I can empathise with students much better. I've learnt that I can kind of slightly see the world more clinically and logically, I think, than most people. Less emotively. So take something like cave diving. Cave diving, if done correctly, is not dangerous. It seems dangerous because it seems emotionally like you're underwater, underground, in a tight, claustrophobic little bit of rock, in the dark, it's cold water, you're on your own. Oh my God, it's hot. Yeah, but if you break that down and actually look at the logistics, the practicalities of that, you can predict all the stuff that could go wrong and you can put things in place that not necessarily to prevent it, because prevention is nigh impossible to a 100% guaranteed state. Like I love Clint Eastwood said, if you want a guarantee, buy a toaster. But you can then go, okay, let's assume it's going to go wrong. What this is my other tagline is, I will say, paranoia saves lives. I'm not an adrenaline junkie. I'm a control freak who is as paranoid and cautious as a person you like to meet. That's why I'm still alive. So paranoia says, so you're right. Which all things can go wrong? Great. Let's assume they're all going to go wrong. What am I going to do about it when it goes wrong? What kit do I need? What skills do I need? Whatever it is, I'll have those. So when it goes wrong, good. I'm still cool. I'm still going home.
Hi, and welcome to Deep.
We love making videos, meeting people and letting them tell their stories.
We really hope you're enjoying the channel, and if you are and would like a bit more,
We've just launched the series as a podcast on Spotify.
It's the full interviews uncut, so you can hear the whole thing, wherever you are, at home or on the go.
But no matter where you're watching the content, please remember to like, comment and subscribe, as it really helps the channel.
And don't forget to drop a comment below and tell us who you'd like us to talk to next.
Thank you. Now, back to our story.
Okay, cool.
It's been the one time, and it was quite late on in my cave diving career, which is why it happened. I was kind of complacent, and it was in a flooded mine system, and I dived in, and I was checking a new camera system, and I was like, and there was the flood, the levels had come up, so the water level was much higher than normal. So normally there'd be a guideline that would run from the surface underwater, and you follow that guideline in, and you follow it out. So your Ariadne's thread, you're going to be fine. Even if you can't see anything, as long as you can hold the line, you're going to get out. I'd got all my kit on and I was in the water. I'd spent all day humping all the kit in to the mine because it's, dive kit always a ton. And I thought, okay, I'll just keep, if I follow the right hand wall in and then follow it with my left hand the way out, I'll be fine. And it was nil vis, just because the nature of the kind of sediment was so fine, it was just like nil visibility. And I turned round, and it turns out this mine system is a honeycomb. And I turned round, I followed the left wall. Well, I followed the right wall in, turned, and followed it back out with my left hand, and it didn't take me out. And I was diving very, very small cylinders. So I wasn't diving a rebreather, which like recycles one breath of what I normally use, which could give me 6, 7, 8, 9 hours in the water. I had 2 very small cylinders on, 2 3-litre cylinders, because I was just testing some kit.
how long would they give you?
At that depth, maybe 10 minutes. It did get to the point where I started thinking, this is going to burn. When it was like 8-degree water, when that first bits of water enter my lungs, it's gonna feel like fire in my lungs. But at the same time, keep myself calm. It's like, right, because at this point, what you got to prevent, not only just panic, obviously interrupt how well you can think, but also change your breathing rate. If you start breathing, as fast as you breathe, the faster you breathe your set down. So you got to try and stay calm and try and keep your breathing rate fairly normal. So they're right, I had an emergency reel on me. So an emergency reel is a little reel that you carry on your arm. It's got about 10 meters of thick line and it's weighted, so you can put it down and you can start doing searches out from that point to try and find the guideline. The problem is I couldn't find the guideline because there was no guideline because I hadn't put one in. On those deliberate searches, I found what should have been the start point. There's an anchor with a line on it that should have been on the surface, but if it had the flood levels not come up. So I went, right, I know therefore I'm close to something. Actually, there's 3 sort of passages off, or 3 areas off that. I thought, right, one of these is going to take me home. So what I did was I just started to follow them. Unfortunately, the one I followed, I ran my 10 meter. Again, I attached my search line to that anchor, and I started doing searches out. What I found is none of the options took me to the surface, because obviously the surface is now more than 10 meters away. So I just committed to one of them, and thought, all right, I'll follow the slope up. If it ends in a dead end, I'll come back on and try and find my line again. And that one took me to the surface. But that whole thing was preventable by just following the simple basic rules I've been following in cave diving for the last 10, 20 years, It's entirely my own fault, and it'll never happen again. It shouldn't have happened in the first place, So I got into it. It was a lull with the TV sort of stuff was beginning to dry up, and because the world of documentary especially has slightly imploded the last few years with the advent of like Netflix and Amazon and Disney and YouTube and this sort of content. Actually, it's changed how people consume media, especially documentaries. So the old-fashioned kind of BBC model, it's changed. So that was kind of, and a friend of mine offered me work as a safety diver. He said, look, a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, is an underwater cameraman. He said, I've got a job in this film, and I know you don't do safety diving anymore, but I'd like you on. It's 3 weeks work in Norway. I need somebody who can use rebreathers, which produce no bubbles, importantly, can operate under ice, can operate a camera and understands lighting, but can also do construction work, because they have to build some rigs for some other big camera units. He said, I don't really know, there's not many people in the country who fit that bill. We'd like to come and do it. The money's good. And I was like, mate, I'm not in a financial position to be to let my ego get in the way. Like, oh, I don't do safety diving anymore. That was 10 years ago. I was like, yeah, I'll take it, because I've got kids to feed and a mortgage to pay. Ego takes the back seat to be able to do that. And I met the stunt coordinator there, and I was chatting to him about the mountaineering, climbing work, about the skydiving, the diving, being ex-military. And he said, have you never thought about getting into stunts? I said, I'd love to, but I said, how the hell do you get into stunts? He said, I'll leave it with me. You think, oh, that's it. So a week later, we got back to the UK, and he phoned me up and he said, we'd like to come to Jamaica for a month as part of the stunt team. So I went on that.
Are you allowed to say which films? Or
it was for No Time to Die. So
right.
Yeah. And I met the rest of the stunt guys. There's like 12 of us on that at that time. It could more later on, and they were like all like extremely motivated, extremely skilled, extremely professional individuals. And these guys were like ex-Team GB gymnasts, Olympic gymnasts. You've got ex like world champion rally drivers. You've got ex like 7 times kickboxing champion, world kickboxing. I mean, the levels these people are at in their discipline is phenomenal, but all just really decent, nice human beings. Oh, lovely. And it was the first time I left the force of like, I feel like I've got my tribe again. People like me. Like we'd finish a day's work and a lot of the crew would go out, on the piss, frankly, whereas all the stunt bees, we would be like, right, who wants to go free diving? Like, who wants to have some paddle boards and go paddling out past the reef? Or who wants to go and do this? Or should we hit the gym? And I was like, oh my God, this is my people here. So on like day 3, I sat under a palm tree while the other film was going on with my friend Dave Grant, and I said, how do I keep doing this? He said, right, there's a thing called the British Stunt Register. And he ran through how you join the British Stunt Register and the sort of disciplines you need and the skills you need to get on there. And I got back to the UK and started training. And unfortunately for that is that sort of 3 or 4 week job became like almost on it all year, doing bits and bobs. Often the wreck's there because it's been marked. So in the UK, for example, the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency will go and ping wrecks. They'll go and find where the wrecks are because they're sort of, if they're a hazard to shipping, they'll mark where the wreck is suspected at. And now with technology, and that may have been because reports of when it sank, where it sank, and in shallow water, it's usually pretty obvious it's been dived. In deeper water, again with technology these days, they can go and actually do like multi-beam sonar or whatever to identify specifically where a wreck is. Obviously, from the point of view of what you see on the way down and what you see when you get there, it's very wreck dependent and location dependent. If you're diving a new wreck, in the Sulu Sea off the Philippines, it's going to be a very different experience to diving one in the English Channel as far as what you could physically see. We descended down and the visibility wasn't great, maybe 2 or 3 meters at most, which isn't brilliant. But we discovered what we thought was an old fishing vessel upright in the sand, and we couldn't see any damage because it had sunk into the sediment. So the bottom part of the ship was kind of in the silt, and there's all these big tubes lying on it. So we took some footage of the sort of to get a rough idea of the length of the anchor, because the anchor types, all these sort of identify. We found a plate on there, so it didn't say the thing's name on it. We tried to find the bell or something like that, because that's if you find the bell, it's always got its name marked on it. And then we did some research. We actually ended up filming all this for the one show, just because I'd mentioned to them they liked the idea of following this kind of wreck mystery all the way through. But we did some research and realised it was a thing called the MV Shoal Fisher, which was a fishing vessel which had been seconded into the war effort in World War II, and it was transporting gun barrels, big I think artillery gun barrels, when it was, I can't remember, did it hit a German sea mine or was it hit by, I think it was hit by a submarine, a German submarine. But obviously the damage to the hull must have been buried, that's why we couldn't see it. So yeah, and because it was quite a small vessel, there wasn't that many places to penetrate. When you go in a bigger ship, something like the Britannic, for example, Britannic is a wreck we dived back in 2019. It's the twin sister of Titanic, so it looks identical to Titanic. But unlike Titanic, it sits at a diveable depth. It's quite deep. It's 120 meters deep, so it's using rebreathers and mixed gases. You're breathing like helium, nitrogen, oxygen gas mix because it is quite deep. But you can penetrate wrecks like that. There's a big wrecks, and they're basically like metal caves. So the same principle applies. You set your reel and you reel a line in so that should the visibility get kicked up because it's full of silt, you can just close your eyes and reel yourself all the way back into to where you're going. And if we are making lines that branch off, we put arrows on them. And the arrows are always a big, thick plastic arrows. You can feel with your hands, even if you can't see them, that will point in the direction of the exit. So you always know how to get out. You just have to be careful in shipwrecks, because people are always like, oh, what if the cave collapses on you? I mean, it's almost never heard of, because caves are quite stable environments. Flooded mines less, so mines aren't as stable, but caves are quite stable environments. Wrecks are obviously metal in salt water often, so they do degenerate and they do collapse. And the older wreck is, the more likely it is to collapse. So again, you have to be a little bit careful. You have to assess things before you go into a wreck. It's why often we use rebreathers, because they recycle one breath, they don't produce any bubbles like scuba gear does, and bubbles can cause collapses.
Right.
Because because water is more viscous, it's thicker, it's more supportive than air. So in a mine or in a wreck, the roof might be held up by the water, but if you flood that with gas, with air, so that support's not there, and the roof can collapse in. Both the sort of career streams I've got at the moment, whether it be stunts, whether it be sort of adventure media, are both dependent on me being physically capable to a certain extent. And if you need a plan B, that plan B has to up and running before you need it. There's no point waiting until I'm too old and broken to do either thing and go, right, what I'm going to do now? Because anything I start generating there will take years to sort of build up the point where I can make a living from it. So I've already started. I'm going to write. Well, my plan is to write books. So this year, this first 6 months of this year, because I think it's going to take me years and years to learn to write books well. Most people say, you need to write 2 or 3 books before you actually learn how to write books. So the chances are it'll be your 4th, 5th, or 6th book that is actually any good.
And what kind of books are we thinking? Are it sort of spy action novels or more?
I think the genre is called contemporary fantasy. The first one, anyway. That's what I'm working on. The easiest, we all say write what you know. So the current outline for the book, I mean, because my degree's in zoology and a master's in archaeology, so I know a lot about that sort of stuff, but also about folklore and myths and legends. So I'm using all that. And then there'll be lots of military stuff in there. There's definitely going to be a bit of cave diving in there. There's even a brief mention of some, because I do voluntary search and rescue, like mountain rescue and like flood river rescue and that stuff. So a little bit of that. So there's not a huge amount in there that isn't. There's not much research for the book, because research seems a waste of time to me. Just write what you actually already know lots about, so just include all that sort of stuff. So that's what, let's say the first book's going to be with that. We'll see what happens. If I find out that I'm really good at writing that, but not very good at writing that, then I might, go off and write whatever.